Hello everyone, welcome back to this week 3 of this course Metrics and Analytics of Marketing. In this week we will be discussing about share of hearts, minds and market. Why these three terms are used in this particular week is because marketing, when we talk about marketing, marketing is related to emotions, marketing is related to rational decisions, marketing is also related to external marketing environment. So, if we look at this consumer decision making journey, some of the purchases that they make are impulsive decisions, are coming from impulsive decisions. You just feel like buying it, that is why you are buying the product. So, there is no rational thought there. For example, whenever you are coming out of the departmental store, in the billing counter, just near the billing counter, there is a stock of candies or chocolates. You just buy those though you have not planned for it. So, this is something called impulsive decision. Then there are certain rational decisions. You will come about multiple brands, about a product category, and you will probably do a lot of calculations regarding the value that can be derived from each of these brand, and ultimately you will choose the one which optimizes your resources, right. So, let us say you are trying to purchase a car. You will have a look at let us say Maruti Suzuki, you will have a look at Tata Motors, you will have a look at Mahindra, you will have a look at Toyota. So, some brands are giving you better brand value, some brands are giving you better mileage, some brands are giving you better engine performance, some brands are giving you better driving experience, some brands are giving you let us say better comfort. So, you will evaluate each of the important features, and based on that you will try to optimize your decision. And some of the decisions or some of the aspects related to marketing is always related to the marketing environment, like what is the overall demand in the market, are people buying luxury products, if there is a evolvement of restaurant culture in the city, if there is a recession period, if there is a if the country is full of demographic dividends at this point of time. So, all these external factors will also decide your performance. That is why we are terming this particular week as a share of hearts, minds and markets. So, in today's topic we are going to discuss about one of the most important marketing metrics, which is called market share. So, probably all of us has already heard this term called market share, and we understand the basic definition of what is market share. In this class, what we will try to go into details of what is the construction of market share, how it should be interpreted, and what are the different business implications associated with the market share. So, let us dive more into this topic of market share. So, by definition, market share is the percentage of market accounted for by a specific company, by a specific entity or by a specific brand. Market share can be defined either in terms of units sold or in terms of revenue collected. Let us say for a particular category of product, total this one market revenue is 1 lakh rupees and company X has sold 40,000 rupees. So, in terms of revenue market share, company X will have a market share of 40%. Let us say we can also analyze the same thing in terms of number of units sold. For this particular product category, the total number of units sold is let us say 10,000 units, and company X has sold let us say 3,000 units. Now, the market share of company X in terms of unit market share will be 30%. So, what does it imply? Though in terms of revenue market share, company X has a market share of 40%, in the same business the company has a market share of 30% in terms of unit market share. The implication is that the average pricing of company X, the pricing of company X is higher than average pricing of the industry, because in terms of revenue market share they have a higher value as compared to market share in terms of sales, market share in terms of units. Unit market share is also known as the volume share, and on the other hand the revenue market share is also known as the value share. One is talking about the volume, how much of the total demand is satisfied by your brand, and another is talking about the value, how much of the total revenue is accumulated by your brand. So, both the market shares are important and it has its own set of relevance. Marketers need to be able to translate the sales targets into market share, because this will demonstrate whether forecasts are to be attained by growing with the market or by capturing the share of the competitors. Let us say my market share was 10%, now it has increased from 10% to 15%. So, what does it imply? Probably 5% market share I have acquired from my, or I have stolen from my competitors. If my market share is increasing from 10% to 15%, then in that case accumulated market share, accumulated net market share of my competitors get reduced by 5%. So, it is a, when we calculate in terms of percentage, it is basically a zero sum game. If I am gaining, somebody has to lose. If I am losing, somebody has to gain. Market share is closely monitored for signs of change in the competitive landscape, and it frequently drives strategic or tactical actions. Let us say I am losing my market share from 20% to 15%. So, I have to keep a sharp eye on who is gaining this market share. What are this loss in 5% market share may be attributed to various companies. Let us say I am company X, I am losing 5% of market share, and company Y is gaining 2% and company Z is gaining additional 3% of market share. So, now I have to look into the different strategies that is adopted by company Y and Z. There can be a possibility that they have decreased the price of their product and we are keeping the price intact. So, that is why in terms of unit market share we are losing by 5% and they are gaining that. So, now if we want to keep our unit market share intact, in that case the strategy that we can adopt at this particular situation can be reducing the price of our product. So, this is just a simple example. So, the actual scenarios are much complex and it is not related to just one factor, it is always a multivariate equation. Why market share increase or market share decrease? It is because of multiple antecedents in place. So, this is the basic concept of market share. So, basically market share can also be perceived as the key indicator of market competitiveness. Let us say if my market share is increased from 10% to 15%, that implies that I am becoming more dominant in the industry, relatively more dominant in the industry. Market share is an indicator of how well a firm is doing against its competitors. This particular metric, supplemented by the changes in sales revenue, helps managers evaluate both primary and selective demand in their market. That is, it enables them to judge not only the total market growth or decline, but also the trends in customer selections among competitors. So, it helps us understand whether the market is growing or not. Let us say my market share is 10% and it remains 10%, it remains intact. But I can also see that number of volume that I have sold in the last year was 1 lakh unit. Now, in this year I have sold 1,50,000 units, but still my market share is 10%. So, it implies that though the percentage market share is increasing, remaining constant, my overall sales is increased by 50%. That reflects that overall market is growing at a rate of 50%, at a CAGR of 50%. One implication of market share is that. Another one is that if my market share has increased from 10% to 15%, what I can derive is like I am becoming more prominent in the market. I am able to steal additional 5% of market share from the market, probably from my competitors. So, probably I am doing better than my competitors in terms of something which consumers are preferring. So, my brand is, consumers are gradually preferring my products over other brands' products. Firms with market share below a certain level, let us say 5%, may not be viable. Let us say if my market share is 3% or 2%, probably I am not viable in the industry for a longer period of time. Similarly, within a firm's product line, market share trends for individual products are considered early indicators of future opportunities or future problems. My market share is decreasing. It implies, one dimension of its implication is that my competitors are having a better value proposition than my proposition. Second implication is that new competitors are emerging in the market, that is why they are also probably taking small chunk of the market share, and which has resulted in decrease in market share of my brand. So, these implications needs to be taken into consideration in case you want to sustain in the market for a longer period of time. If competition is becoming intense, then probably you have to be innovative in terms of either in your product line or in terms of your marketing strategy, so that even with intensive competition you can stand yourself in the market, in the industry. Let us have a look at the construction of this concept or metric called market share. Basically, as we already said, that market share is the percentage of a market accounted for by a specific entity. The entity may be a company, the entity may be a brand, the entity may be a particular model of a particular brand. And market share can be calculated from two dimensions, as we already said. One is from the dimension of units sold and another is from the dimensions of revenue generated. Unit market share, the units sold by a particular company as a percentage of total market sales measured in same units. Unit market share, mathematical formula wise, it is units sold by the company divided by total number of units sold for that particular product category, combining all the brands available in the industry. So, unit sales divided by total market unit sales. Similarly, we can deduce these equations to this one, calculate multiple metrics. For example, if we know the unit market share of a company, we also know the total number of units sold in the entire market, then we can easily calculate the unit sales of this company. And we can also calculate the total market unit sales if we know the unit sales of the company and the unit market share. So, these are the calculations that can be derived from each other, but the genesis is that it has multiple implications. One is how you are performing in the market and how the market is overall performing. Then revenue market share is similar. So, total sales revenue by your organization, by your brand divided by total market sales volume in the entire market. Remember that market share is calculated for a given period of time, normally a year, right. So, I mean we have to keep in mind that market share is not in infinite time dimension, it is for a specific period of time. Now, there is another concept called relative market share. It is just an extension of the market share, but it helps us understand how we are doing in the market, how we are performing in the industry as compared to our prominent rivals rather than the entire market. So, this is important because it helps us taking the strategic decisions in such a way that what better can be done in this market. If we assume that whoever is market leader in this particular industry, they are doing the right thing. If that is the assumption, then in that case, what is, how much we are lagging as compared to them, and what are the corrective actions that we can take in order to make ourselves prominent in the industry. Relative market share indexes a firm's or a brand's market share against that of a leading competitor. Relative market share compares a company's market share to that of its primary competitor, the most leading competitor, providing insights into its competitive position within a market. The market share of the leading competitor is the benchmark. So, let us say in a particular market, let us say extremely competitive market, and there are multiple equally competent competitors. So, in that case, let us say 10 competitors are there. If all are almost equal, then all of their market share will be in and around 10%. Somebody will have 9%, somebody will have 11%, something like this, between 8 to 12%. Now, let us say one competitor is having a market share of 12% and my brand is having a market share of 10%. So, this relative market share will be 10 divided by 12, that is close to 0.8. So, if it is lesser than 1%, then what does it imply? That we are lagging as compared to the leading competitor. How much we are lagging is given by this value. If it is 0.8, means we are close to 1, we are almost at par the leading competitors. But if it is much lesser, then in that case probably we are not even in comparison with the leading competitor. So, our sustainability in the market is questionable. This metric is useful in comparing a firm's or a brand's relative position across different markets and in evaluating the type or degree of competition in those markets. So, if my relative market share is close to 1, it can be more than 1 also in case you are the leading competitor, then probably we can compare with the second leading competitor, right. So, in that case what will happen? We are actually ahead of the market, we are ahead of the average performance by any competitor, by the average competitor. So, that shows that we have a competitive edge. Relative market share greater than 1 indicates a company is the market leader, while less than 1 suggests that they are a follower. So, but rather than we are using it as a benchmark of 1, we need to check how much from 1, how much deviation is there from 1. If it is much more than 1, let us say, then in that case we are a clear leader. Theoretically, let us say there are 51 companies and we have a market share of 50 and rest others are each of them are having 1%. So, they are negligible competitor for me. So, if they calculate this one market share, relative market share with me, then in that case they will get a market share of 500,000 50,000 yes 50 times higher market share. So, that is they are negligible to me. On the other hand, let us say even if I am having a market share of 10% and there are only 2 competitors, my competitor is having the rest 90%. So, in that case also I am negligible as compared to my competitor. Where is this competition? Let us say there are 10 market players and I have a relative market share value of 0.8. Then it is time for me to work and beat this lagging 0.2%. So, this is the concept of relative market share. Basically, how I am performing in the industry in relation to the significant competitors in the market. Now, to assess the firm's or a brand's success or its position in the market, the relative market share is used. A firm with a market share of 25% would be a powerful leader in many markets, but a distant number 2 in others, right. So, if in a particular marketing environment, in a particular industry, there are only 2 competitors, me and another competitor who is having 75% market share. So, I am second, no doubt, I am also having I mean, if I look in isolated settings, 25% is a good market share, but I don't stand anywhere in front of my competitor, because my competitor is having 3 times my market share. But let us say in another this one scenario where there are 10 competitors and I am having 25%. So, probably I am the company which is having the highest market share, and probably I am the dominant. So, relative market share offers a way to benchmark a firm's or a brand's share against that of its largest competitor, enabling the managers to compare relative market positions across different product markets. Relative market share gains some of its significance from studies, albeit the controversial ones, suggesting that the major players in the market tend to be the more profitable than their competitors. So, it also gives you a lot of business implications. If you are though your market share is 25%, if you are a market leader, then probably this can give you a lot of implications regarding the profitability of the company. So, this metric was further popularized by Boston Consulting Group with its famous BCG matrix of relative share and market growth. Basically, the BCG matrix, I am not going to have a detailed discussion of BCG matrix, but all of us should know that we have 4 categories of positions. Either we can be, I mean, our growth is higher in a growing market, or our growth is lower in a growing market, or our growth is higher in a non-growing market. So, by these definitions we can divide our positions into 4 categories. So, relative market share is extensively used in BCG matrix analysis. So, let us quickly look at this one, construction of the relative market share. So, it is the brand's market share divided by the largest competitor's market share. Again, relative market share can also be calculated by dividing the brand sales by the largest competitor's sales. So, similar like units market share and revenue market share. Now, let us quickly calculate this relative market share of this particular example. So, this example is taken from a book which is the textbooks of our course. In the market for small urban cars, managers at A1 want to know their firm's market share relative to its largest competitor. So, what will be the value? So, as I can see, okay. So, there are basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 competitors in the industry. We have units sold, we have market share, we have revenue in place and revenue market share in place. Now, let us calculate the relative market share of A1 in terms of units sold. So, what will it be? So, we have to first look at the unit market share 50, 20, 15, 10 and 5. So, who is the market leader? It is the Zipper. So, which is having a unit market share of 15%. A1 is having a unit market share of 15%. So, if we want to calculate the relative market share of A1, what we have to look at is this one. So, the total units sold for Zipper was 25 units, for Twister is 10, A1 is 7.5, Bowls it is 5 and Chain it is 2.5. So, total market sale is 50. So, what you can do, basically you can also calculate the individual market share and then can calculate the relative market share. So, what will be the individual market share for A1? So, total sale is, let us say, let me calculate individual market share for each of these companies. So, individual market share for the first one will be 25 divided by total 50, that will be 50%. I am just putting market share, unit market share, and I can also calculate for revenue market share. So, initially I will just calculate for unit market share, it will be 15%, 50%. Then for Twister it will be 10 divided by 15, that is 20%. So, if it is 7.5, 7.5 divided by 50, it will be your 15%. 5 divided by 50, 10%. 2.5 divided by 50 is 5%. Right. So, now I am not going to have this calculation for revenue, because I mean revenue calculation will be a bit tougher as compared to this one, unit sales this one, but the process remains the same. Now, if I have to calculate the relative market share for A1, what will it be? It is 15%, but the leading competitor is having a market share of 50%. So, my relative market share in this particular industry will be, in terms of unit market share, it is 15 divided by 50, that is 0.3. So, what does it imply? How much lesser I am as compared to 1? If you are a leader, you have to be in 1. So, now I am 0.7 lesser than 1. So, it implies that I have a miles to go before I reach my leading market competitors. Even in absence of this entire data, if somebody tells me that your relative market share is 0.3, I can assume that I have a lot to do in order to be in alignment or at par my leading competitors. The same can be calculated for the revenue. Next comes the market concentration. So, market concentration is similar to market share, relative market share. How extensively the market is concentrated, how many competitors are there. So, market concentration denotes the degree to which a relatively small number of firms account for a large proportion of the market. If there is only, I mean theoretically, if there is only one competitor in the industry, your market share is 100%. So, it says if your market concentration is 1, in that case there is only one competitor. This is also known as the concentration ratio. Market concentration is usually calculated for the largest 3 or 4 firms in the market. Related metrics to market concentration are 3 firm concentration ratio. So, what is it? A metric which is the total sum of the market shares held by the leading 3 competitors in the market. Let us say in our previous examples, if I look at the previous examples, then who was having this leading 3 competitor, 50 plus 20 plus 15. So, this market concentration will be 85%. And there is another concept which is called Herfindahl index, which helps us understand the market concentration. A market concentration metric which is derived by adding the squares of the individual market shares of all the players in a market. As a sum of the square, this index tends to rise in markets dominated by large players. So, if a particular company has a very high market share, in that case the value will be, let us say 70% market share, 0.7 square will be equal to 0.49. But if all the players are having a market share below 10%, which is a dispersed market share, which is a, I mean many companies are having some portion of the market shares rather than single 1 or 2 companies are having the major chunk of the market share. So, in that case this Herfindahl index will be 0. Theoretically, if there is only one firm, the Herfindahl index will be 1. So, which means that a value close to 1 for Herfindahl index signifies the market is dominated by few players. A value, I mean the Herfindahl index value can range from 0 to 1. A value close to 0 indicates that the market is divided among multiple players. So, if it is let us say 0.001, a Hirschfeld index value of 0.001, that means there are thousands of competitors in the market and none of them have a significant superior market share. So, Hirschfeld index helps us understand the concentration of the market by various brands. So, the calculation is done here. The same example we have calculated in terms of unit share and in terms of revenue share. So, if I look at this one in unit terms, the 3 firm concentration ratio is 50, 20 plus 15, that is 85, but in revenue terms it is 81.3. So, what does it imply? It implies that these 3 firms probably are making an offer priced lesser than the other firms, lesser than the remaining firms. So, thank you for today's class. So, basically we have understood the market share, the concept of market share, the concept of relative market share, the concept of market concentration, the concept of Hirschfeld index. So, these metrics are extremely important in the sense to understand your position in the industry, whether you are a market leader or you are a market follower or you are an average performer in the industry. So, this concept will help us understand our position in terms of our dominance in the entire industry. So, with this note I will conclude today's session. I will see you with some other matrices in the next session. Thank you.